Hello, and welcome to the Bethesda Bubble podcast, where we discuss philosophy to anecdotes and everything in between. My name is Alan, and today we have a cool topic. Today's topic is how much agency do we have over our own identities? And first, let's all introduce ourselves, just once again.
I'm Alex.
I'm Jack.
Faraz.
Lemon lime meal.
So yeah, let's get started. Anyone want to begin our conversation?
I'll take this. I think people have a deceptively low level of agency in this. I know that there's honestly a lot of I don't think I have a super firm stance, but I do think that a lot of it, people say nature versus nurture. People are more or less a function of just what happens to them, like kind of the world around them. For example, someone who grows up, that's an example of why people often end up like in rebellion against their parents, is if they find their upbringing to be frustrating for one way.
Yeah.
For example, someone raised in an overly conservative household might find themselves as an adult incredibly hostile towards that kind of lifestyle, and the polar opposite. And likewise, someone raised in an overwhelmingly liberal one might become disenfranchised with that. So that doesn't happen every time, but I've seen it happen with like people in my family or people just, at school or whatever. Like it is a thing that happens. And I think that for the most part, it's happened to everyone to some extent, whether from family or not necessarily. It's not only about politics. It's also just interest. What did your parents get you as a kid for Christmas? Basically just what stuff was there to shape you in your formative years? And what stuck, I guess.
Yeah, no, I like what you're saying. So I think basically you're trying to say like you're a product of your times. I'd say that makes a lot of sense. But then, when I look at identity in like a broad sense, I think of characteristics that are already established for you, and then characteristics that you have control over. Because obviously you can't change like your race and like your genetics and all that stuff. But and you also can't change a lot of the influences that are in your life, especially your earlier life when you're growing and developing a lot mentally. But you can choose how you treat people, I feel like, and how you want to express yourself, and then that makes you that's like the part that you have control over, and like you have control over what you want to do in life.
Right. I think that, well, actually, does anyone here believe in nature over nurture, as in like they believe genetics have a greater impact on your how you develop?
I mean, the thing is, so sometimes I say like human nature, blah blah blah, but honestly, I don't really know like what nature and nurture are. I don't like I feel like everything is kind of just a result of what's already been established. So I don't know if some things are human nature or some things are learned. But what I do know is that you do have socialization that impacts you in your life.
Yeah, so I take more of the stance of nurture by definitely a more significant margin, because I think, when a person's born, it's basically a blank slate in their brain. And I think that, yeah, there are some underlying things that can be inherent, but overall, in psych right now, we're talking about behaviorism. That's probably the one I think is the most valuable. How you're brought up. That's just, I don't know, it just seems very explicit to me. But what about you guys?
I think that the way you look can determine a lot of things. For example, not every aspect of it determines a lot of how you look determines how others treat you. So it's sort of a base, because how others treat you is a very formative part.
That's also like behaviorism, because that's not like.
And that's the things I was going to say. That's the best point I can think of for nature, and that itself basically.
I guess, yeah.
You could argue that ends up just lending itself to nurture more, anyways. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's a particularly strong argument to be made for nature. You could say like people might be, I think I've heard somewhere, I don't know if this is accurate, that introversion and extroversion can be kind of inherited. I think that's like, there's not really a gene for that tells a human to socialize more or less. I don't know what source that was, but I think it's probably false.
If I had to say, it's probably like learned behavior. Like me, I was really shy when I was younger because my parents got divorced when I was like 6, so they would give a lot of attention to my baby sister. So, I was kind of just left alone a lot, so I had to become more independent, but I didn't know how to interact with people as well. So I think it's like a lot of things that define you later in life are a result of when you were really really young. Like chances are, if I see my parents fight a lot when I'm like 3, I might fight with my wife in the future. Like that's just how that's just how psychology works, because like we tend to replicate what we see our parents and role models do earlier in our lives.
Yeah.
Very Freudian of you, Faraz. That's what us people in psychology, which is everyone but you, call psychodynamic approach.
Wait, you're all in psych? Oh wow.
Yeah, all of us but you, Faraz.
Yeah.
Unfortunate as it is.
No,
Next.
but I think that there is some like you guys have all heard your parents say like, oh, he gets that from me, he gets that certain quality from me, he gets that from me. I wonder if like they actually genuinely believe that they get you receive those traits. Like I feel like that's just kind of a thing parents like
They
low key think, but or
they
subconsciously
kind
think.
of believe in that. So basically, advocates of the nature debate believe that, and I'm not saying I am one. It's just what I've heard of, that they believe all of our characteristics and behaviors are the result of evolution. So genetic traits handed down from our parents influence the individual differences that makes us each unique. So, for example, when a person achieves a tremendous academic success, and this is a question I have, a rhetorical question for that matter, did they do it because they were genetically predisposed to be successful, or did it result from a very enriched environment? Another question is, if a man abuses his wife and kids, is it because he was born with the violent tendencies, or is it something he learned by observing his own parents' behavior? Again, there's so much to this debate that it comes under I forget the name of it, but it involves the biological, the psychological, and there's this one third category I'm right now forgetting, social and cultural, and it was down in that huge Venn diagram. So I really think you can't just assume it fits in one of those categories. I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like nurture is a way bigger aspect than it is of a nature perspective.
Right.
But they do have their own reasons and tendencies to develop to the person that you are today.
I think the biggest question.
Wait, Emil, do you think that's like a mixture of all those things then?
I believe it's a mixture because like you can't be just purely like I'm not purely the person I am because of, at least in my opinion, biological. I mean, if I'm bred to be the most successful person alive, then shout out to physics because I have a C in that class. I don't think I'm bred for that.
Yeah, okay, Alex.
Yeah. I think the most interesting question is like how much it affects your intelligence, I guess, or like your intellectual capacity. My mom often says like, oh, I'm glad you got your dad's brains because I was, a moron in school. So I was just wondering, like, I don't know exactly if I assume it's hereditary somewhat, or at least maybe not hereditary, but genetic. I think that there are some people who just can't like comprehend stuff as easily. There's not really another way to explain that, I think. Like the the difference between like how much like knowledge versus like the capacity to learn. Like obviously they're different metrics that often are kind of confused to be the same thing. I think people who are very uneducated could be intelligent and have the capacity to learn. But the question is, not everyone has that same capacity. So clearly, there's some sort of like predetermined
A
aspect.
lot of people don't apply themselves.
Yeah,
I
and
would assume that they were.
IQ is probably that predetermined thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guarantee there are a lot of people that are uneducated that live in like very poor areas with very awful education systems that are like 3 times the IQ that I have. Like, not obviously not, but they would have way more mental capacity and way better. Like, I don't know how to say it. I guess like they would learn more and understand better like everything than I would if they were given the same opportunity as me. I don't know.
The view that I have is I feel like based on your parents' genetics and when they obviously, had sex, because I mean that's why we're all here, they their genetics with their mixture, from what I'm believing, is they try to make the best quote unquote creation yet. Obviously because of how evolution goes and natural selection, pick the best, get rid of the worst.
Humans are naturally eugenic, though, necessarily.
I will continue on that, but as of right now, so as I was saying, it goes from that.
Yeah.
But back to the why one can argue of intelligence, I think that was just purely a genetic flaw because obviously, in biology, sometimes you're going to have mutations, and that's why we have, some people inherit diseases like I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but like isn't Parkinson's hereditary? Obviously their intelligence is not one of the average human. It's specifically on the lower trend. So obviously they weren't created to have that trait. That was just its own mistake. It's a genetic mutation. They didn't choose to have that genetic. It was just a flaw in the system when creating said person.
Well, then I have a question though. But like, how do, let's say, geniuses? Have you guys seen the show Criminal Minds? There's
I have not. I've only saw one episode.
There's a character named Spencer Reed, and his mom is like schizophrenic. And I don't know about his dad, but he's a super genius, like insane genius. How do you explain people who don't have like super genius parents? How do they become geniuses?
I want to talk about a little bit of a story, like where the word genius comes from. So in like a lot of ancient cultures, like they believed in like mythology and stuff like that, and there was like a lot of people think that if you were really good at math or really good at science or really good at art, that you were possessed by a genie, and that genie gave you those super elite skills, and then that's why you get the word genius.
Question, wouldn't that also just be put down to the argument that it was just based off a genetic mutation that caused it? Obviously, people aren't born super geniuses.
There are studies that like indirectly correlate. If you have smart parents, generally like with the nurturing aspect and I guess genetics, you do have smart kids. But
I'd say that's more. I would definitely say that if you have smart parents and you end up being smart as well, that's definitely nurturing, because like they have the same chance of you like birthing like a genius child as the same chance of you birthing like an autistic child. Like it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also comes down. I guess kind of what you were saying, Alan. It goes with the same question of how to average intellect of two people can produce someone who has a very low IQ because of a genetic mutation. Kind of the same thing. I don't know. In my opinion, I haven't looked into the studies of it. Same thing with a high intelligence.
It could be recessive genes as well.
Yeah, exactly. It could always be what's the name? The recessive allele,
yeah,
I
but
believe.
I feel like when it comes down to like a very low IQ individual, I don't think it's necessarily like has to do really much with genetics much at all, because if you nurture your kid in the correct fashion, I don't really see how he could turn out.
The way I view it,
no, that's completely false, because like, well, for example, my brother has autism. I guess his IQ is really high, but his mental capacity is really low, and it's not my parents' fault. My parents nurtured him very well, but he just doesn't have enough.
No, I know, but when there's no like underlying like other conditions, obviously, like
that's
probably just all nurturing. Yeah, that's probably all just the area they live in.
That's what I'm saying.
Kind of what I was like mentioning earlier. I feel like kind of with the clean slate. You're in that clean slate, in my opinion. You're already given things. Nothing that should, I guess, for example, be of a natural surprise. Like, for example, you aren't born evil. Maybe in your genes you might have something wrong, but as a baby you're not going to obviously know. You're a kid. Most likely what you're going to do is cry out of the womb because you literally came out of your mother.
Yeah.
But I think, again, in the early years, nature has a huge... Nature already has its influence because, as the result of the creation of the fetus, it already has the genes already made. Now the baby just needs to come out. But right after that, whatever happens then, in my opinion, is just nurturing aspect. Unless if something happens to the child, like, I don't know, a weird genetic thing happens that out of nowhere something blank happens, but I can't think of any examples of that.
See, the thing, like when it comes to things, especially like intelligence, whenever I ask myself, like, yo, is this based on genetics? Is this like predetermined? That just makes me so pessimistic, because then sometimes it feels like if I'm not doing well in school or some task, I'm just like, yo, is this my fault, or do I have control over this? And that question just like kills me sometimes. I'm just like, am I wasting my time, or do I just need to work harder and apply myself more?
And I think that connects to the greater question that, like I said in the beginning, how much agency do we have over our own identity? Do external factors play such a significant role that we are essentially unable to make our own decisions? Or do you think like it's actually really complicated, because like if you make your own decisions, they still stem from when you couldn't make your own decisions when you were like a kid, and it all kind of it's like very circular. It's really weird.
I think that everything, like your personality. I'm thinking this now. Like, I think your personality, how you treat people, the way you act, even if you feel like you're in control of it, it's all based on what's already been established for you. Like, if nothing had been established for us, we'd all be the same probably.
Yeah, that's why then there's like a very evil person or whatever. Sometimes people just blame the parents because that's pretty easy thing to do
Yeah,
because
and I think a lot of times it actually is the parents' fault.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it is,
or it's
but
just sometimes it's not the parents. Sometimes it's like sometimes the parents actually are kind of do the opposite effect where the parents push them away and then they get in. Like for example, like I'm thinking my thought would be like Hitler. Like his dad was like totally abusive, right? So he left his dad, and then he got influenced by other people who were blaming World War I on the Jews, which is why he created the National Socialist Party. You know what I mean? Like I'm just saying that's kind of my thought. Like sometimes like I don't know if I'm off topic all of a sudden, but I think I don't know. Anyway,
No, you're fine.
no, you're good.
I think it kind of, you're talking about. I feel like there is this. We're doing this in AP Lang right now. I'm already forgetting what it is, or like what the but I think the guy's name is Chris Hedges, and he had, and this is going to take us back to what I was talking about in this old podcast, which talks about in his passage. It was like talking about the importance of, you guessed it, manipulation, deception, and etc. So what was really interesting is how in his I guess one can call it an essay, he believes that there is in society there's two aspects: the majority, in which is blindly followed from political theater to consumer culture, because everything from those two ends and in between has some sort of manipulation in it. Well, there's a small minority that actually perhaps had their own identity, not because of, or at least for the most part, they have their identity because they did what they did, not because of some what's the word? I literally just blanked out. Confounding variable. So I think for majority wise, many of us are influenced. Kind of like what Jack was mentioning about the Hitler thing, the World War One. Media has such a huge impact because, like, again, kind of the same thing with our phones. If I went on my YouTube recommendations right now, we would probably all have different things. Even though we might have some similar videos, that's not the case at all. From our ads to the recommendations we get from the internet, everything is personalized for us to consume as much as we can on the screen. So in this case, one interesting thing I've been seeing is I keep getting ads from conservatives. Not that I've been into that ideal at all. I don't know why I keep getting recommended them. They are ads, but it's like talking about like the Democrats are doing bad things, and this one was an interesting one. As you all know, I'm a fellow UFC fan. I'm very excited for what's going to happen this weekend with Khabib and Justin. Go Khabib. I got an ad from Jorge Masvidal. He's a very famous UFC fighter, but he has a very conservative ideal. And I get an ad from him, not from him specifically, but Trump endorsing Jorge Masvidal. He used him as a representation for Latinas to vote. So basically what I'm saying is, like, there are so many factors that influence us, and the media is just a huge part of that. We all get our own confounding variables of advertisements to videos, which causes us to think and nurture through different aspects. We just don't know it yet because, I'm not saying we don't have the intelligence to notice it, but for the most part, our brain just doesn't really like catch on to it. It just happens for a reason. Sorry to go off like of a huge tangent there, but that's just my opinion.
No, yeah, you're right. As in, like, from, I guess, we don't really realize, or we aren't very cognizant of the fact that so much of our world is just based around some sort of preference being overblown and then basically being varied in a bunch of different ways and packaged as just kind of, it's just how it is, right? And that's, aligns with how the media and how the internet works a lot nowadays. And it's like those little, there are little holes in there that are like our own small decisions, and every small decision adds up. And I think that really is, I guess, one argument that you can make for the other side of do we pick our own identity, because there are like decisions that we make that really infer who we are, but like I feel like those always tie back to the earlier I guess nurtured aspects of our life. So yeah, it's actually just, it's really riveting how that works.
maybe this is a weird theory. I just literally came up with this now, so I mean, I'm open up to criticism for this. But do you think many people argue for the nurture because they don't have the cognitive, I guess, kind of like what we were just mentioning, like they don't, kind of like with the media, they don't catch it, consciously. It just kind of happens unconsciously. Do you think what we are be- because of genetics, but we use the excuse of nurturing because, you know, we're just, I wouldn't say we're afraid that everything is based off a genetic ideal, but we just haven't noticed it. I don't know. Like that's the thing of psychology. You can't really determine everything. There's so many theories, which is why it was so similar to philosophy in its its beginning times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I forgot what I was gonna say. No, I was gonna say yeah. Sometimes I just tell myself that it's like it's nurture or like I have control over it because like I mean I'm like I can be pretty egotistical sometimes. I don't like feeling powerless or not in control. So sometimes I just tell myself that I'm in control. I can do anything. Blah blah blah. So I don't have to accept like the harsh realities of life. And if I talk from like my personal experiences, uh, like me and my dad are like really similar in a lot of ways. Like we think alike. Like sometimes my dad used to be able to do this thing where he could like tell what I was thinking, and I'm just like, damn, wow. And then I've noticed my sister and mom are a lot alike. I'm not gonna get like too negative about that, but I don't think that was like a genetic thing. I don't know because I feel like my mom was never really my role model. My dad was always my role model, and with my sister, I assume it was probably the opposite, maybe. So I think that was a lot of it.
I think that to comment on what Emil said earlier, I don't think that nature versus nurture is like a parallel conversation to free will versus absolute like just no choice at all. Because I think that you could argue the same. Like if you want to be an absolute like anti free will kind of believer, you would think that you have no control over. It's basically internal or external forces, I guess you could say, and either one would leave you with a distinct lack of agency if taken to the logical extreme of you have no control over, say, some formative event that happened to you. And so basically you could think of it as like a human kind of pachinko machine, I guess, if you know what that is. You drop the coin from the top, just get bounced around. And on the other end, you could also think that you choose what you interact. It's like basically how much agency do you think the individual has? I don't think that people would necessarily try to shirk responsibility or ascribe more to themselves than they get by choosing one or the other. So I don't think that people consciously think like, do I want to be responsible for this or not when determining their stance on it? I think a lot of people just tend to arrive at the nurture one because that's the more, I think the easier conclusion to come to for most people, including myself. As for I think free will is a separate conversation that I don't have a clear stance on that myself. I flip flop on that a lot, but
Yeah.
Same here.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's just like this kind of reminds me of something. You know how, for example, if I were to tell you, if I just talked about blinking, most likely you'll be thinking about, okay, I should just stop blinking. Then you feel the urge to blink, and therefore you blink. It's kind of like that's for some reason this is how I'm feeling about to the free will and destiny thing. Do we say we have free will because as soon as someone talks about it, we start to be like, yeah, technically I have free will. I can do whatever I want. I can leave this podcast right now if I please. But that's only because we're just reminded that, you can't do anything, but in fact you can. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I know you
I
mean.
feel like with life, it's like involuntary. But at the same time, if you talk about it, you're like, wow, no, this is voluntary. I'm going to do whatever I want.
It's almost like a paradox. Like every time someone brings it up, that's when you think like, oh,
Exactly. Kind of like blinking and breathing and all that. Like, no one's going to be consciously thinking about breathing until you talk about it. It's like, all right, breathing time. Or like blinking time.
Now, if I had to talk about my theory, this ties back a tiny bit into the religion thing we were talking about last time. Like a lot of people say, like, oh, there's no God because why is there so much suffering, or like why do people not get what they deserve in this life? And some people are just like, oh, God's trying to test us. I'm kind of in the middle. I think God or the higher power, whatever you want to call him, I think he kind of just leaves us alone, leaves this world alone. So there's the theory that we're all in a simulation. I sort of think that we're in God's simulation, and I think we have free will, and then I don't know if there's reparations in the afterlife, maybe, maybe not. But what I do know is that, or what I think I know is that you do have control over what you do in this life. Like I don't think it's completely predestined or like written for you. But yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, like there's this. I think it starts with a D or something, but there's like this one religion.
Is it Taoism?
No, Taoism is more of a philosophical idea.
Oh.
I don't know. It starts with a D. Could be wrong, but it's basically this idea that's like God did things for a reason. Like, I don't know, we were created by God, but then God left the earth alone for us to do whatever we like. There's a belief for it, and I'm forgetting the name of it.
Yeah, I've heard that. Like,
It just reminds me of that. I'm gonna go look it up real quick. You guys gotta.
That sounds sort of like deism because it doesn't sound.
Deism. That is deism. That is. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was just reminded of. It sounds like deism to me.
What is isn't deism just like God? Because like God is a deity.
No, it's like
You believe there's some level of higher power, but you don't subscribe to one major religion. You don't, since you don't have any idea which it could be. It's basically like the thought process behind it is any of these religions. I don't really know which one is correct. I don't have a solid, firm way to describe to one way or the other with absolute certainty. So I will kind of an idea that if I trust that there is a higher power, they usually believe the most common thought process is I think there's a higher power. I will live by commonly agreed upon like positive moral values, and hopefully this vague higher power, of which I'm not sure what it is, will accept me into the positive version of that religion's afterlife. As
in short terms, it's basically saying God is transcendent but not immanent. So basically, you believe of the specific higher power, but you believe they don't intervene in the universe.
I feel like that's actually
very similar to agnosticism, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's similar to agnosticism. That's that represents a lot of my beliefs. But anyway,
agnostics, deists definitely believe in a higher power. Agnostics are torn between do I think there's one or not. Deists are torn between I think there is one, but I don't know which one.
I see. Well, that's actually a really interesting. We could do a whole other podcast on deism and stuff, and continue the religious principles. And
because I just learned about it in Modern World. Shout out to Miss Sherry for that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting though how everything can kind of tie back to nurture. Like I think everything we've discussed today can tie back to the idea of nurture being a component in your life, and I think nature is like a little more. It's more like wavering, because
it's like I feel like it's like the puppet master, but at the same time, it doesn't do much. It's there, but I feel like it only does like its magic at the beginning. There, it's like, all right, do your own thing, and then like out of nowhere, comes back and controls you for a real hot second. I don't know. I don't know. To me, it has so many parallels to a lot of things, kind of like free will and. I don't know, Alex was saying it doesn't, but for me, it's like free will and like destiny, that sort of thing. And like, there are many other topics you can compare this to, but like, I don't know, it's really interesting. I believe it starts with nature and then, well, most psychologists believe there's a mix between these forces. And I guess that's what I am. Problem is, where can you deter where the nature comes in and where the nurture comes in? Or I guess that's self-explanatory at that point.
Thing is, I think that the way I think of it, like I don't know if this is necessary. I think this might be faulty reasoning because it does seem a little odd to me. But I was thinking that if you think about the future, something will happen. Definitely, we don't know what, but there is something that happens. So in my mind, I was thinking if there is a definite chain of events that does occur just eternally, forever, there is a set chain of events. Does that mean that we are just kind of like, if you think of it as like there's like a progress bar playing as it goes through like the different frames. Are we simply just kind of, living through the progress bar, just going through stuff that already is going to happen? That's why I lean more towards there's no free will. Not necessarily, or it's more like everyone has...
It's kind of like what...
That's a weird thing to visualize. I think that...
No, I get it. It's like kind of what the famous movie quote of... I hate to bring this up. I don't want to pull out my inner Marvel fan out, but like what Thanos said, no matter what you do, destiny still arrives. You still arrive at the said predetermined destiny. Reminds me of an episode from... really weird reference, but The Amazing World of Gumball. There was like an episode.
I think I was thinking of that. Wait, could go on?
It's like basically the family of like the Wattersons are at this like yard sale from Banana Joe. There's a painting, and they all predict stuff from the past. And then there's this one painting that hasn't happened yet. Oh, right. And they were like, This is very interesting. So then it goes through the random events where basically it just leads up to what the painting was.
Yeah.
And Gumball was like, man, this sucks. And then Ananias was like, do you think this would have even happened if we never seen the painting at all? And then it just ends on like, yeah, a cliffhanger. But like,
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me of that process.
That's what I love about Gumball and similar cartoons. Like they're meant for kids, but they can be so deep sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's something great.
Yeah, no.
I think
Look back into regular show things.
Yeah, I was gonna say regular show also. No, regular show. This is gonna be.
they talk about the paradigm all the time in that. It's great.
Look, but regular show was actually a little bit like, well, of course, like a lot of cartoons already like break the fourth wall a lot. Like they acknowledge that their shows, but like regular show was almost gonna end like Futurama. Like at the end of like in the finale, Mordecai and Rigby found like a videotapes with all 7 seasons, and like it was gonna reset, but then they stopped it from. No, they went back to the first episode in the original one, but then they were able to prevent that from like actually like keep like being like an infinite time loop like it was in Futurama.
The ending was so sad.
All right, well, that was a really good discussion. We'll definitely go more in depth on more of those components in a later podcast. Thank you guys for watching. We hope you have a great day. Hope you enjoyed this podcast with the 5 of us today, and we'll see you later.
Good night.
Or good morning.